brother just told me. Jay, why are we laughing so much? How many years, John?
I started teaching Hamlet when Lyndon Johnson was president.
And she says, I met the youthful Lord Paris at Lawrence's cell and gave him what becoming love I might, not overstepping the bounds of modesty.
No, I already did that with the other
I should
guy.
say that.
Him and Beowulf and...
But you know, when he dies, he's like desperate to be remembered. Tell my story. Remember me.
Should we be doing this? Should we stop right now?
No.
Yeah, Jay, we're back again for another episode, book 18 of the Odyssey. You ready to go on this one?
We're in Ithaca. It's official.
Yeah.
Penelope is lurking. Odysseus is in disguise.
Yeah.
Literally anything could happen. And what's weird is we have all these chapters left, and it seems like we could finish any minute. And Homer's just making us wait. It's very like Return of the Jedi, Empire Strikes Back. Like we have to wait.
Yeah. I feel like I'm being manipulated. I feel like I'm being, forced to wait or just spoon fed something.
Right.
But I feel like I'm at one of those nice restaurants that I never really go to or never go to enough, where there's a really good chef. Like the last great restaurant I went to was in the Boston area. It was called Frank McClellan, that great chef. And he could put a meal before you, and that's how I feel that Homer is doing. So even though I feel like I'm being manipulated, I'm being fed, it's parted out over time, still I feel like I'm in good hands, and I'm going to be happy that I went down this path and took the courses as they were given. As we go. But I have to say also, though, Jay, as this book has gone on and on, we are on book 18 tonight. And that is, I'm not good at math, but I think we're closer than ever to finishing this book as of tonight. So 18, 24 books, it's well within sight.
Yeah.
So I'd love to jump in to this book and keep going. There's some tension that was built in the last chapter, especially last two chapters. Picks right up on it. I think Homer never forgets that he's telling kind of an adventure story and keeps his eye on the plot the entire time. So that's exciting. But before we do, I do have a poem for us to start off with. Early 20th century American poet Vachel Lindsey. And in book 18, this poem is called The Perfect Marriage. And in book 18, the marriage of Penelope and Odysseus is evoked.
Yeah.
Penelope, begins to come out of the woodwork a little bit here. And I remembered a single line from this poem from years and years ago. And so I looked it up today, and the poem's longer than I thought. However, it kind of lays out, I think, a way that Penelope and Odysseus may have been thinking about their marriage over these last 20 years. There are many lines, there's many sentiments in this poem that line up very well. So I'll read it. It's The Perfect Marriage by Vachel Lindsey. And it has some unforgettable lines, literally one unforgettable line in it for me. Here it goes, part one. I hate this yoke. For the world's sake, here, put it on, knowing 'twill weigh as much on you till life is gone, knowing you love your freedom, dear, as I love mine, knowing that love unchained has been our life's great wine, our one great wine, yet spent too soon and serving none of the two cups, free love, at last the deadly one. We grant our meetings will be tame, not honey sweet, no longer turning to the tryst with flying feet. We know the toil that now must come with spoil the bloom and tenderness of passion's touch, and in its room will come tame habit, deadly calm, sorrow, and gloom. Oh, how the battle sears the best who enter life. Each soldier comes out blind or lame from the black strife. Mad or diseased or damned of soul, the best may come. It matters not how merrily now rolls the drum. The fife shrills high, the horn sings loud, till no steps lag, and all adore that silken flame, desire's great flag. We will build strong our tiny fort, strong as we can, holding one inner room beyond the sword of man. Love is too wide, it seems today, to hide it there. It seems to flood the fields of corn and gild the air. It seems to breathe from every brook, from flowers to sigh. It seems a cataract poured down from the great sky. It seems a tenderness so vast, no bush but shows its haunting and transfiguring light where wonder glows. It wraps us in a silken snare by shadowy streams, and wildering sweet and stung with joys your white soul seems a flame, conquering day, conquering night, brought from our God, a holy thing, a mad delight. But love, when all things beat it down, leaves the air wide. The heavens are gray and men turn wolves, lean with despair. Ah, when we need love most and weep when all is dark, love is a pinch of ashes gray with one live spark. Yet on the hope to keep alive that treasure strange hang all earth's struggle, strife and scorn and desperate change. Love, we will scarcely love our babes full many a time, knowing their souls and ours too well, and all our grime. And there beside our holy hearth we'll hide our eyes, lest we should flash what seems disdain without disguise. Yet there shall be no wavering there in that deep trial, and no false fire or stranger hand or traitor vile. We'll fight the gloom and fight the world with strong sword play, entrenched within our blockhouse small, ever at bay, as fellow warriors, underpaid, wounded, wild, true to their battered flag, their faith still undefiled. The Perfect Marriage by
Nice.
Vachel Lindsey.
That's
So
awesome. I've never heard that.
Yeah. I don't love the title, but the conceit of marriage as this thing, it's going to constrict us. We know it'll change the love, the trysts, the fun we had, but we do it and we hole up against the world. And I really think of Odysseus coming back to Penelope, his true partner in fighting off the world, fighting off the suitors, fighting off time, fighting off evil. They do it together, and believably in the
I think
Odyssey.
one of the challenges of this chapter, not to get ahead, is exactly what you're talking about, that end of 17 trickling into 18. Geez, I mean, we're expecting Odysseus and Penelope to reunite now. Like,
yeah.
In most authors' hands, it would have either happened already or it's happening in book 18. So
Yeah.
book 18, to me, one of the challenges is Homer's trying to figure out a way to keep us inside the story and engaged while delaying this inevitable reunion.
That's a great way of putting it.
You know?
I
And instead, he gives us the sort of ethics of Ithaca as a substitute. And it's a fascinating substitute because it highlights why we need him home.
Yes. Yeah, that's right. It's shown. So it builds. So in that sense, it's building, as we see the ethics, the state of Ithaca in its devolution. It builds our own desire for that end in the same way that Odysseus has it. And so it draws you into the story, makes you feel what the main character is feeling, which is just brilliant writing. I don't know how the postmodernists ever got any traction at all. I mean, Homer is way ahead of them in plot device.
It is funny,
breaking the fourth wall. It's amazing.
I said this today doing Hamlet with my seniors that I don't know, I remember I had a really blessed to have the undergrad education I had in English. because
Yeah.
I was forced to read from the medievals to now, like kind of a really nice overview. And I could, as an and I wasn't the best student in the world, but
No.
I
Yeah.
could give you the sort of nuts and bolts of the Middle Ages, the Renaissance, neoclassical, Romantic, Victorian, 20th century, and give you the general ethos of each period, the literary tendencies of each period.
Yeah. Yeah.
But here's the weird thing, like, did anything happen after the Greeks that was totally new? I mean, I would say, like, if you read Homer and Shakespeare closely, I sound very, like, old and crusty, but, like, I don't know what else there is that's totally novel. I mean, certain the stylistic things definitely evolve, absolutely. Like, that you can't publish in the 19th century what you tried to publish in the 18th. You know what I mean? Like, that's just what it was. So styles change and expectations change. But in terms of, like,
Yeah.
big stuff, I don't know. Like,
Well, the great novel, the great modern novel, think, oh, wait a minute, James Joyce, he broke it. But then the name of the novel is Odysseus, like,
yeah,
oh crap, like he himself is,
yeah,
is reaching back with all of his innovation. Isn't it ironic that he's
yeah,
telling a story whose name is the oldest story? And in some way that's important to him. I don't think it's just a trick. I started Faulkner with my
no,
students. It's the same thing, as I lay dying. I didn't know this. I found this out this week. As I lay dying is a quote from the Odyssey, purportedly. That
yeah.
Agamemnon says when Odysseus talks to him in the underworld, as I lay dying there, he stabbed my body. Or something.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. I didn't know that. So even Faulkner, who is purposefully, trying to be avant-garde and write something extremely different and,
He's
outstanding.
stuck.
He's
Yeah.
stuck. Yeah. And happy to say it. He admits it.
It is what it is.
Yeah.
It's too bad he didn't quote Elpenor, because the title of the book could have been "Don't Drink and Sleep on the Roof."
Don't leave me, guys. That'd be the name of the book. People are
One more
surprised on
drink,
his story. And I think that would have fit better with Faulkner's life, being a man
That's right.
fond
That's
of the
right.
mint juleps and whiskey.
He really didn't think. He didn't think through this at all.
No, too bad he didn't have us there to help him along.
That's right. Just with the title.
Yeah, right. I can't write this out, but I could have got that title right.
Yeah.
Well, let's go to it. We've got book 18. We've got we've got obvious but essential elements. You're teaching this book and draw students into it. Don't let them miss these obvious things we'll lay out. However, there's some subtle things that if you haven't read it several times, you might read right past. So we have a couple of those we want to lay out for you. And then maybe just our final reflections. What are our lingering questions? Or for me, I have this time kind of a lingering, just admiration, in this chapter, a lingering wow. But Jay, you want to start us off then? Obvious and essential in this book. What do you have to get in book 18?
Yeah, I'm fascinated. And when I taught this poem years ago, I didn't think of this as a thing, but I'm really interested in, like, I think the more I think about it, Paul, the more I think that Telemachy, the setup in the first four books of the poem, is important, because Telemachus, like all people who have to grow up, you have to leave your hometown.
Yeah.
And you have to see how other people live and operate. But I also think that goes for the reader, that the reader starts in Ithaca for a couple of chapters.
Yeah.
And then goes to a couple of others. So the reader kind of matures and grows up, because the reader expands his sort of universe along with Telemachus.
Yeah.
And it just seems like, I don't know, like Ithaca has historically, a peculiarly loyal relationship with marginalized people, whether it's Eurycleia, the maid, who we know that Odysseus's father Laertes was kind to.
Yeah.
And I don't know, it's just really interesting to me. So I'm interested in, like, the history of Ithaca's treatment of the marginalized, in light of the fact that Zeus's greatest virtue is Xenia, is hospitality, is that this could be a god in disguise stuff.
Mhm.
And it goes from this great line where Odysseus says, it's just early on in line 19 of the Emily Wilson,
Yep.
when Odysseus is arguing with the beggar and says, this door can accommodate us both. And I think that could almost be a subtitle of the Odyssey, because everywhere he goes, he needs the door to be opened.
Yeah.
So I think that's really, really good. And then we obviously get Penelope later. This is 220 to 222. So these are not big passages.
Mhm.
Penelope says, when she sees beggars, Odysseus in disguise, namely, being abused. I mean, Penelope says this, and Paul, it's right out of the Gospel of Matthew, honestly.
Yeah.
Penelope says, what happened that you allowed this is 220 in the Wilson. What happened that you allowed a guest to be insulted? And then this great line, I've been thinking about it. She says, if strangers in our house are so abused, what then? It's so stark, right?
Yeah.
But basically, like, if we don't obey the most blunt wish of the gods, then what the hell are we doing? What's the point of anything?
Yeah.
And I love the fact that it's Penelope that comes out with this significant sort of ethical and ontological statement, right?
Mhm.
This,
Mhm.
if we are who we say we are, and the gods are who we say the gods are,
Yeah.
and our values are what we say they are, then what the hell are we doing? Like, it's Penelope that says this, Paul.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So this is one of those moments where when I think of like Homer on the chopping block of a curriculum, because Homer's Homer, well, you have to, that's fine, but you have to read it. You have to read it. You have to read it. And Penelope and a whole host of other women, from Helen to Athena to Eurycleia, with Homer, this is what I was saying before. The weirdly marginalized people who you don't think are going to have power and agency have it over and over.
Yeah.
Penelope is calling to task the entire worldview of Homer in front of all the characters, right? So,
Yeah.
if Zeus, the god we're supposed to worship the most, cares about us treating strangers well, and we allow this behavior to happen, the hell is going on? Like,
Yeah.
she calls it. And I just
That's
think
right.
that's an incredibly strong, gutsy moment.
Yeah, it's great. So much so, like Telemachus takes it in that scene. Like
Yeah.
Telemachus is in his, like he's taking charge. He's been a little bossy, or whatever in the last couple of chapters, and sort of talk back, to Penelope, essentially to say, I'm in charge here. He doesn't do that in this scene, So to your point about the power of that scene, he takes it. He takes it as a real indictment. Yeah, that's right. I mean, this beggar that the chapter opens with, the chapter opens as a real beggar showed up, not Odysseus, pretend beggar. And a lot of the drama of the first part of the book revolves around that. But yeah, they are that beggar. Odysseus's household's treatment of that beggar is the test. I mean, it's the cultural test, of their piety, of their identity, of everything. And if you could excuse anyone for letting that go at this moment, you would excuse Penelope. She's got other things, to worry about, other things in her mind, but she doesn't. There's nothing more important than this. She points us back, like you were saying, you become a more mature reader, in that she turns our head back to not to the, the abuse, their household is taking, and the bloodbath and justice, that you hope will come. But she comes over and says, what just happened to a beggar in my house? Yeah. It's a great point.
That stood out to me, Paul, because, sorry to interrupt, but like,
no,
last thing I'll say. I think it's important for us as the reader right now to be reminded of the state of Ithaca right now. Because if Ithaca is anything else but dysfunctional, Odysseus, the beggar in disguise, can be dismissed. We don't need him. And one of the worst levels of dysfunction in this universe is for strangers to be abused. And this is, to me, a really strong call for the need of Odysseus's leadership. And I think in terms of drama, Odysseus himself, after 20, Paul, you and I are away from home for 20 years. We can't wait to run in and be in our own home. He has so much self-restraint. He can stay in disguise, hear his beloved wife, who he's not even out to yet, say this. He must be chomping at the bit in the way that, so that to me is like super tension, super drama. We're waiting for this connection. Most other authors would have had it already happen. So I think there's like ideas to be discussed, but also drama that's being created. I think both are happening at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah. And which is brilliant. And it keeps you on the line. And the other thing I want to say about that is that violation, it doesn't come off to me as, and I think this is a thing that helps you draw students into this story, is that this weird thing about Xenia doesn't come off as one of these weird ancient one-offs. You just have to understand, they just liked helping out poor people. It's weird. It's not like that. The suitors appear like freshly evil to us. It's so easy to associate them with, the very real or the stereotypes of the bad people in society now that people love to hate, like those awful political operators in Washington, D.C., or those horrible just animals on Wall Street, or those, or like the frat house sort of, whole way of behaving that just runs over everything and everyone else, for their own gain, for their own advancement, wherever you find it. You find it everywhere, but those are sort of the stereotypes of them in politics and money and, and maybe, these hierarchical societies, like you find in college or whatever, where they're just people who are just going to win. Yep. These guys are those guys. We still hate them. We still hate the way those people take advantage of, mow over, have no real thoughts for the people who just don't have what they have. And so in that sense, I mean, Homer couldn't have landed on a more, timeless. It's funny. It's not just a Greek cultural, oddity that you have to, through acculturation, you come to understand. It's us too. There's still, it's still bad. So it's a believable ethic. I guess I would say, that's good. And that's a key. I think that is an obvious and essential part of this. That this same dynamic of Xenia is on the table in this chapter. Homer's using it, as you say, Jay, to build our own, to build drama, to build our own anticipation, of the end, and to build out these characters. And one of the characters is definitely Penelope. I've got for my I think the obvious thing to say about this chapter, it kind of ties in with what you're saying, but I'll put it in slightly different words, is that this is a foreshadowing chapter. That's how this feels to me a great deal, is that in this chapter, I think in some blatant ways, what's going to come in the next 6 books or so is blatantly foreshadowed in this chapter. So Homer is laying down some chips, laying down some markers on the path, sort of like a little breadcrumb trail that you can use to get back through the story when you need it. But it's also marking the path moving forward to where, surely students by this time have a sense that this story is going, some kind of justice, some kind of reckoning is coming. So I wrote down, I had 3 different sort of instances of foreshadowing here. Odysseus, at the beginning of the story, ends up being pushed into a fight with this beggar. So there's a real beggar there who's standing at the door. Odysseus, Jay, as you said, offers him, hey, there's room enough for both of us to beg at this door. But the beggar is rude to Odysseus, the beggar, and tries to run him off. The suitors overhear it and they say, hey, look, these 2 beggars are fighting. Let's fight them, like having some like 2 rooster cockfights or something like this. They're going to put them in a ring, and take bets on them. And so they turn them against themselves. Odysseus, turns in his mind what to do here, whether to take him out with a single blow or to make it last a little longer, make it a little more believable, which he decides because he's hiding. So this is the first foreshadowing is you don't realize, the suitors certainly don't realize, that what they just witnessed and laughed at and got a lot of entertainment out of is a little picture of what's to come for them. This little beggar is something more than everyone thought that he was. And we see it played out in a tiny way because Eros, the beggar, gets his jaw broken and he gets dragged out by his heels. And, that's what's coming for everyone else. Right after that, Odysseus finds Amphinomus, who comes up to him. And this is the second clear foreshadowing in the story. Amphinomus comes up and gives him the prize of some blood pudding or something, and wine and bread. Hey, you won the fight. We bet on you. You win this. Good job. And Odysseus, I don't know, he seems to see something in him and say, you seem well born. Maybe you can hear what I'm about to say. And he tells him, I was like you one day, once. I thought everything was gold and I was going to be great. And my luck obviously changed. You should be careful. And he basically says, you should get out of here. You should get out of here. Odysseus is coming back. And there's a great line where Amphinomus says, gravely, he made libation, took a sip of honeyed wine, and gave Odysseus the cup back. And Amphinomus, for his part, shook his head with chill and a burdened chest. And he turned in the great hall because his heart foreknew the wrath to come. He knew that what the beggar was saying was true, but Athena wouldn't let him leave. He wanted him to stay. She wanted him to stay there to bear the brunt of it. And then we get a blatant foreshadowing. There's one of those cycling forwards of the story where we go way forward in time. And Homer says, death would have him broken by a spear thrown by Telemachus. So he sat down where he was. All right. So there's some a very blatant foreshadowing. Then maybe the final one, that I had is Odysseus takes kind of a risk after this fight and confronts Eurymachus, one of the leaders, one of the kings in the area who's there, and tells him blatantly, moves him to anger actually by sort of threatening him, challenging him, and says, listen, you're all talking big now, but if Odysseus came back into this room, that doorway would not be wide enough for you to get out fast enough. You'd barely be able to fit through it as fast as you'd be running. So all those things are some blatant foreshadowings I think you can lay out for students. They're part of the story. They're part of the building, part of the anticipation, the tension. They picture what's to come very soon. So I would lay those out as the obvious thing. That feels like, what's going on here and all this patient, restraint in the plotting here.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah. So let's move to the next thing then. Subtle but crucial. As you page through this, Jay, what's that subtle thing you landed on?
I have Penelope. It's around line 249 in the Wilson.
Okay.
And it's what she reveals. We've already had Theoclemenus and other moments where she's being told that Odysseus will either be home or he's here now, similar to Odysseus sort of experiencing the possibility of hope with his backstory of trauma. Odysseus is always suspicious of anything hopeful.
Yeah.
Penelope has fought her own wars and is equally suspicious of anything positive and hopeful, and has always been. So, Penelope says in 249, it says, Penelope replied with caution, the deathless gods destroyed my looks that day the Greeks embarked for Troy, and my own husband Odysseus went with them. If he came and started taking care of me again, dramatic irony alert, I would regain my good name and my beauty. I am weighed down by grief. A spirit set so many troubles on me. At the time that he left Ithaca, my husband grabbed my wrist, took my right hand, and said to me, now, wife, I do not think we armored Greeks will all come home unharmed from Troy. They say the Trojans are good warriors with arrows and javelins, and they ride chariots drawn by swift horses, which can quickly turn the tide of war in which so many die. Some god may bring me home, or I may be captured out there in Troy. I do not know. You must remember this. My parents need to be well cared for in our house as much as now, or more so with me gone away. When our son's beard is grown, you must get married to any man you choose and leave your house. And she says, those are my husband's words. The time has come. The night when I must marry is at hand. Terrible, I am cursed. Zeus took away my happiness. She goes on. She echoes the first spoken words of the poem with Zeus complaining that mortals blame gods for all the problems.
Ah,
Here,
yes, that's right.
so here's the interesting thing that I think is worth paying attention to.
Okay.
Penelope says this in front of Telemachus,
Yeah.
which is one of those moments which is a sign of growing up when your parents say adult things around you.
That's right.
She admits being a particular kind of broken around her kid.
Hmm.
And I don't think that's irrelevant in either direction. I think that says something about Telemachus.
Yeah.
I also think that says something about Penelope. And I think I mean, there's literary devices to discuss and all that stuff, but I think in terms of just human drama,
Yeah.
we've come a long way from the beginning of the epic, where Telemachus is tucked into bed at the end of the first chapter of the epic.
That's exactly
Like,
right.
seriously,
Yeah.
like think of your kids, Paul, or my
That's
kids.
right.
Like, there are certain conversations you have with them, and as they get older, you start talking about family history, and you start talking about, well, you know, Uncle so and so doesn't get sleepy; he has a drinking problem, or no, I mean, I'm serious. Or like
I'm
sometimes,
totally
like
with you.
sometimes Grandpa, you know, Grandpa really struggles with Veterans Day because this is the experience he had in Vietnam. Like
Yeah.
whatever the case is, like there are times where we have real adult conversations with our kids. They're in the room, we know it, we choose it, it's conscious, and we're
Yeah.
acknowledging that they're not children anymore by
Yeah.
by honoring them in the presence of these conversations that are vital and
Hmm.
mature.
Hmm.
And it's interesting, Odysseus, Penelope is doing that here. I just find it an interesting little, not even super subtle hint that this other person is a man now on some level.
It's great. And pushing with that, I'm just thinking as you're saying that, if you sort of lay down that thread for students, draw their attention to it, listen to them talk about it, it will pay. Like Homer does not drop this thread. He takes it right to the last book. This
Yeah. Oh my
development, the
God.
change of the way adults behave in front of Telemachus.
Yep.
It is a rich thing to draw attention to. I really like that, and that's something you might miss. But Penelope is talking differently, you know, in front of Telemachus. So
Yeah.
it's a picture of a development of her kind of breaking character, of dropping face. She doesn't come out until she's had herself done up. You know, she's putting on a
Right.
character all the time, but she's not doing that in front of Telemachus.
And
then
he's
it's another,
also, like, to be honest, he's not the stupid, insecure little boy that he was early on saying, "Hey, mom, shut up. Like, this is a
yeah,
conversation for men and stick to your loom." I mean,
yeah,
that's an insecure boy's comment, right?
yeah.
And
That's
he's
right.
not, and maybe she's talking to him as an adult because he's behaving like one. I mean, I tell my students
Yeah,
all the time, if you want to be treated like an adult,
yeah,
do your work on your own, ask for help on your own, be grown up on your own, you know,
yeah.
engage with big things on your own. If you behave like a child repeatedly, you're going to be treated like a child,
Yes, yes. And
you
you've
know?
got to take on the challenges yourself. You've got to do
Yeah.
them yourself, even if they seem trivial or tiny. And that's
Yeah.
what Odysseus, or that's what Telemachus is now. He is a person who has gone out in the world, sailed down the coast, and sailed back home. That's what he's done. He's held court with other, you know, with other noble people. He's been able to hold a conversation. He's done very basic things, but it's completely transformed him. He didn't
Yeah.
just Google. He just didn't Google for answers, you know, and sit sort of
No.
passively and soak them in. You've got to do it. You've got to have the conversations. You've got to sail the boat. You've got to, you know, drive the cart, you know, which is what they
Mhm.
did in his, you know, in his journey out in the world to get information, and it changed him.
Yeah.
It
What
changed
about you, Paul? What's your subtle passage?
Well, I think the subtle thing that I would like to draw attention to kind of goes to a line you said earlier, Jay, which is the ethics of Ithaca. One of the subtle things that I think is rolling out here in this chapter is I'm not sure exactly how to say it. If it's something like the difference between appearance and reality, or
Mhm.
something about how this thing of growing up and developing is about learning to feel appropriately about things. And this seems to
Mhm.
be, and I think I like that. It's the development and growth of Telemachus is about his development of his emotions, of feeling appropriately about circumstances that come up. And I have kind of three things in mind. First one is the beggar thing we talked about. When the suitors hear the beggar and Odysseus fighting, they see it as an opportunity for entertainment. These aren't real people. They're not people who suffer, who maybe once were great and now have fallen on hard times, are actually hungry. They're a chance for a cheap thrill, a cheap sort of gladiatorial game, they can have quick and easy. That's one. Two, the scene where Penelope comes down, Athena goes out of her way to make her look very beautiful, to look tall and thin. It says very white of skin and shiny and bright, so that she'll come down. And Athena's goal is to get Odysseus angry, to get him kind of worked up when he sees his wife, and then sees how the suitors treat her. So there's sort of two options when you see beautiful Penelope come down. One of the options is the options that the suitors take. Line 342, it's worth quoting. Then by a pillar of the solid roof, she paused, her shining veil across her cheek. The two girls, her maids with her, close to her and still. And in that instant, weakness took those men in the knee joints. Their hearts grew faint with lust. Not one but swore to God to lie beside her. So the suitors all see Penelope, and immediately it's just a lust scene, right? They're like, "Oh, I'm going to have her." That's their response to her. Athena's point in making her beautiful was to play on a person whose character is developed a little differently. Odysseus is up for trysts, as we know, but when he sees her, he does not. It's not a lust reaction. It's a reaction of here is something that arouses in him actually pride, arouses in him a sense of duty, a sense of goodness and beauty and order and even justice. I think by extension, to see the injustice or the ugliness of Penelope, this woman being treated like that by these, by this horde of men, rouses in him a sort of righteous indignation. So that's a feeling appropriately, about it. There's two options there, and Odysseus finds the right one. And I think that last one I had in mind too was that scene you brought up where Penelope confronts Telemachus and says, "What just happened in our house?" Telemachus, and she checks in on him. "Are you feeling appropriately about what happened? Do you understand?" And it's another great line where Telemachus responds to her. He looks her in the eyes and answers with a clear head, with discretion, and says, "Mom, I can't take it ill that you're angry. I'm not upset at you for kind of chiding me about what just happened. I know the meaning of these actions right now, both good and bad. I've been young and blind. All right? I've been a kid. I've been stupid. How can I always keep to what is fair, what is right, while these sit here to put fear in me? Princes from near and far, whose interest is my ruin, are there any on my side? But you should know the suitors did not have their way, matching the stranger here, for the stranger beat Eros to the ground." But he says, "I've been a kid. I didn't know. I've got these guys who are bad examples in front of me, and they're urging me not to do what's right through fear. Actually, they're making me afraid to stand up and say, 'Hey, we don't treat people that way, or not in my house,' because I've been a child." And it's a great little peek, a little look at, I think, as you said, the state of things in Ithaca, which is greatly deteriorated. But it also shows this sort of ethic that I think we can identify with, that your students, can be drawn into, the indignation, that you can feel. It's not wholly strange to us. Obviously, it's not a Christian world, but it's not strange to us.
No, and I just, with Thanksgiving just having happened, I have to say, like, my grandmother, my aunt, my mother, I grew up in a world where, like, it was holidays and stuff like that were family. But if any of those women knew anyone who didn't have a place to go, they would be there too. And that could be people from the neighborhood, people from the town, people from the church, people from work, like whatever. But invariably at holidays, they'd be like random people.
Yeah.
And as a kid, you're like, who's that? But you got used to like, oh, there's people can come here. And so we
Yeah.
just had Thanksgiving at my uncle's. My cousin and I tag teamed the food. And a handful of people that were there was probably 13 or 14 of us. And a handful were not relatives. They were people who maybe their family was far away. Maybe they didn't have, like, a couple of people just didn't have family. Like they would have been alone.
Yeah.
Now,
yeah.
I think of my grandmother, who was the matriarch. We named my daughter Julia after her. She was the formidable Polish Nana that I've told you about.
Right.
And we're not perfect, but I think she'd be happy that the tradition of Xenia, of hospitality that she embodied, has a version that's alive and well now. Maybe it's different, but I think that that ethic, she was just really formidable, Paul. And if you were around my grandmother, you will be influenced by her. Like that was just, she was one of those women who were like, you would change your life if you just were up against her ever. And I just really value that. I value that. You know,
were your kids there to see it? Were your kids there?
Oh yeah. And I just think I really value and I think this is important to mention to teachers, and to anybody reading this, that this wasn't originally a book to write papers about. Now, Paul and I will make you write papers.
That's right.
But there are human, emotional, real life things, even though the food is a little different, the language is different, but the worries and the concerns and the passions and the values that live inside of this epic were at my Thanksgiving table, and maybe yours too. And I just think it's important to acknowledge artistically what's really cool about it, which Paul and I talk about, but also what's very, very universal and human. And there's all kinds of stuff about that.
Oh yeah, it's shocking, and it's a shocking pleasure, and that's a great connection. That's a great connection to make. It made me think of my own. I have a great example of that too, that I had in my upbringing of people who did that, and so it's it's not that strange. It's thousands of years old, and thousands of miles away, and culturally inconceivably different. But there are these things here that are us, that are you and I and our families, and it's fantastic. It's a fantastic connection to make. And it just recommends the book. It really does. That's not bad. I don't have anything too distinctive to end up on for the lingering question. Is there anything that bothers you about this chapter?
No, I had something that stood out. I intentionally am not talking about Odysseus at all. I'm taking an Odysseus cleanse for book 18.
Okay,
and
gotcha.
My lingering question is, why does Athena make Penelope more appealing to the suitors? So you can ask that question. Like, why does she make it more, oh my God, she's amazing, right? But it says in the Wilson, she makes her appealing to the suitors first by giving her, quote, godlike power.
Ooh.
Power. So I just I found that really interesting, that it wasn't usually when Odysseus is spruced up, it's like his thighs get bigger, he gets younger, his hair is browner. Right. He gets physically younger. But with Penelope, I think this is worth mentioning in a class. Like, the first thing that's changed with her is her power.
Wow, I didn't notice that.
Now, I don't know what to make of that.
That's awesome.
So, I mean, I'm an English teacher, so I could certainly make things up. I don't have to know anything. I don't have to know anything to talk. That's the blessing of being us, Paul.
I've never let that get in my way.
Oh God. Which reminds me of a story. No. But I just, again, it's another example of like people who haven't read Homer. I'm not saying Homer is a postmodern feminist. He's not. But where if you actually read it, there's surprises all the time. And it brings me back to, this isn't in Homer, it might be in Hesiod or somewhere else, but that Odysseus, as opposed to all the other men, didn't choose Helen of Troy, who was palpably the most beautiful. He picked Penelope, her relative, because of her brilliance.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I just think there's something really interesting about her. Like her at her, if you like, like orange juice concentrated, Helen concentrated is like powerful and brilliant. It's not about her beauty. I mean, she is over time made really lustrous and beautiful, and the suitors fall in love, fine. But the first thing is, in Lynn Wilson anyway, is power. And I just think that's her in her concentrated form. And moving towards the reunion of Odysseus and Penelope, we're reminded that like he's not in this for a beauty pageant. Like, when he talked about homosophrene, like-mindedness with Alcino, was it Alcinous? What was the name of the king?
Alcinous? Yeah.
Alcinous. But it was, you get the sense that like that's what he missed, is like, I want to have like really good conversations. Yes, I'll have, I will be married, in a physical way to my wife, but also like I miss talking to this like-minded, interesting human that I can't talk to anymore because she's far away. So I think the power there's a lot of like connotations and strings attached to that are really interesting. Because a lot of this book is like, how do people connect to each other? What determines whether people are connected to each other?
Yeah. It's a great question. Like, why is he so driven to come back, to her?
Yeah.
Which is a way of answering what you're saying. How do these people connect? What do they connect over?
Yep.
And it's something distinctive, and he enjoys it. Like, it's right here in the chapter. Her power. I was trying to find the line that you were referring to. I couldn't find it exactly, but the expression of her power is a clear part of the chapter, because she urges the suitors. She says, most women who have guys coming after them, they come and bring their own food, and then they bring some gifts. I'm not getting a whole lot of gifts. Odysseus laughs. His heart laughed when he heard all this. Her sweet tones, charming gifts out of the suitors with talk of marriage, though she intended none, and he knew it. Like he could tell. He read and heard. This wasn't like a flirty thing where she was literally looking for, one of them amongst them. But he was like, yeah, she's like me. That's what I would do. Is what he's saying.
Yeah.
I would try to wring some more cash out of these guys
before
killing them.
And I have to say, I've read sort of indictments of Odysseus, like he only sees himself everywhere. But what I see is this is their relationship.
Yeah.
Like they're like-minded in that they know how to be clever when things are difficult.
Yeah. Right. And I think we've read Odysseus enough that if this was simply an imposition of his personality on Penelope, I think that would come through. I wouldn't like that,
No.
In the story.
Absolutely.
The question is she believably herself?
So this chapter, I mean, it can be seen as, this would definitely, Paul, I think, right? You can maybe agree or disagree, but if you were doing a abbreviated Odyssey, you'd skip this chapter and summarize it. But I think it's an example of like Homer pauses what we want to happen, which is the unification of Odysseus and Penelope, and gives us color, and he gives us values, and he gives us tension. And it isn't simply, I'm going to pause and build up towards the climax. Nope. I think there's like what the town that he's returning to and the woman he loves are about is compromised. And it matters very much to the heart of this book. So this is like an essential chapter, actually.
Yeah. And if you read it, here's the really dangerous thing, is that if you do read it and don't skip it, you may find yourself caring about it as well, and agreeing with the bloodbath that is to come.
Well, Paul,
that's what draws you in.
Paul,
Oh, wait. Yeah. What did I say? Forget it. Yeah. And I think it draws you into, it challenges, like you said, this, Homer's not a postmodern feminist, but he's also not the patriarchy that he's often accused of.
No, he's like messy, and he's messy and complicated.
Yeah, you got to read it again. You got to come to it and hear what he actually says. There might be stuff here you don't like. Okay, fine. Penelope, doesn't have a job in the corner office. She's not bringing home a salary with health benefits. But she is not. She is not this retiring, sort of collapsing, safe, beauty that Odysseus just sort of keeps up in the cabinet, and takes her
No,
down
no,
for
no,
fun.
no, no.
It's,
This is
it's
a
not,
this is a for this is
nothing
a
close.
formidable woman who
Yeah.
I would argue is fighting wars equal to the wars Odysseus has fought in her
Well, I
own
said
way.
it last time. I think she's the only one who defeats him in this book, who we
Oh
see
yeah,
who,
yeah,
who
yeah.
actually bests him. Obviously, she doesn't pull down a sword, and go after it. Homer's not stupid, but she does win, and that chapter's coming. So it's
Right.
a pleasure. It's a great pleasure.
Yeah, that's good. Well, the difference I think between the Odyssey and the Iliad, I think one of the million differences, is that the wars in the Odyssey are verbal.
Yeah, that's
You know?
right. Even all the accounts of the wars, we only know them by Odysseus' telling of them.
Yeah,
Right? Like,
yeah.
except for
No,
here at
that's
the end.
good.
Well, all right. That's not bad. That's book 18. There's strong stuff there. Things
Yeah.
well worth drilling into, and that you don't have to twist your students' arms very hard to help them find material to write about, material to think about, or if you're doing Socratic discussions in your class, which I hope you are developing those, to have discussions about. It is fantastic to hear students talk about this book.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
those are some things. All right. Is that enough, Jay?
I think we're good. We're coming on the home stretch. We're gonna have to find something else after this. I'm gonna have podcast identity crisis.
Yeah, I know. We're gonna have to find some other book. I'm told there are others. I don't know, but we'll have to look.
I
We'll have to
can't
look
imagine.
around. We'll have to look
I think we
around.
should do a series of Dr. Seuss. We're gonna do a one fish, two fish, red fish, blue fish.
So anyway,
All
all
right.
right. Hey, it's great to chat, Jay.
Yeah, always.
Good talk. Good insights. I appreciate those, and I look forward to catching up with you on book 19 next time.
All right. See you, Paul.